Alright, hey guys, and welcome. Let's talk about something that I know a lot of people are afraid to address, a lot of people have shied away from, and that is the topic that I keep repeating in a lot of my reviews, and I know a lot of you hate me for it, and that's fine, but let's have a civilized conversation about this, and let's talk it over and sort of understand each other a little bit. So, what I'm here for today is to talk to you about how Tom Holland's Spider Man is never really, has never really developed over like what has he been in like six movies? He's been in Civil War, Infinity War, a small part of Endgame. He's been in the what do you call this? Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. So that's six films now that Tom Holland has featured as Spider-Man, and in none of these movies has he ever reached, the lengths that even Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield reached in their very first film. Like at the end of their first films, they were already established as Spider-Man, and whether New York as a city or the world accepted them for who they are, they were already out there doing their part, whether they were vigilante or hero, whether they were celebrated or despised, regardless of which side of the law they were on or the people they were on, they were doing their part as Spider-Man. And Tom Holland was, he was pulled into this entire superhero universe in a very strange fashion, mainly Tony Stark, who has literally been the reason many people became villains in the MCU. He's created what do you call this Mysterio villain. He's created that fire guy villain who showed up in Iron Man 3. In Iron Man 1 also his enemy is like his colleague in the second Iron Man. Yeah, and so on. And even in some Avengers films, he just makes an enemy out of people like whoever he can find. Basically, it's just Tony Stark is the reason enemies are made. Right? He's never really inspired anyone to do good, which is really strange now that I think about it. But anyway, let's talk about this guy, Tom Holland's Spider Man. So let me just give you guys the gist of it first before we break it down. I think that'll be a little bit easier. In Captain America: Civil War, Tony Stark, Iron Man, pulled this little kid, Peter Parker, into the world of being a superhero and put him in an airport fight. And that airport fight scene, this Civil War, this MCU Civil War, is nowhere near the the seriousness of what the Civil War really was in the comics. In the comics, people actually died. Superheroes died. Spider-Man got it really bad. There's versions where you have Captain America versus Iron Man. You also have versions where Captain Marvel is involved. And man, if Captain Marvel is involved, the story is totally different because she's like she's like nuclear levels of power, and it's Iron Man versus her, and yeah, she's a whole other beast altogether. But even in the regular Civil War between Captain America and Iron Man, there's a lot of seriousness to it. There's a lot of danger. People do really get hurt and do get some people do end up dying or close to dying, I would say. But in this Civil War that we watched, the only one who actually got hurt was War Machine, who I think 1% of fans actually cared about. I think the rest of the people were like, oh god, someone's hurt finally, because no one else literally got hurt from an entire battle between two sides. And quite frankly, you can tell, yes, they are very friendly and they're holding back and all of that. But it seemed like Iron Man could have just done it with his own technology without needing to recruit a 13 or 14-year-old boy, which is what it was. Because Peter Parker at this time was probably 13 or 14, because through the events of all of the movies all the way to No Way Home, he reaches the age of 17. So he goes from 13 to 14, to 14 to 15, 15 to 16, and then 16 to 17, which is, I believe, his age at the end of No Way Home. So yeah, this is roughly how it starts. And then in Homecoming, well, it this one takes place shortly after Civil War. He already has a suit given to him from Civil War. He's exploring it. I think this was a really decent starting film for this Spider-Man. Really shows you how he is as a character. He's a very pop culture geek, and he's also he has a friend Ned who they're exploring the suit with. He goes around trying to hunt for criminals and stuff, and he gets bored most of the time because there's not really many things for him to actually face, because there is the Avengers and the police squad and all of that, and they're apparently all doing their job. But in the end, he does realize that there's something that Tony Stark has missed out, and that is this huge plot that the Vulture is trying to steal some advanced Stark tech. I think it's basically the tech of the aliens, the Chitauri, right? The Chitauri tech, which was left behind, and that's what the Vulture was mainly looking for. So yeah, I think it was a great start where he defeats the Vulture and Spider-Man: Homecoming. Well, that was great. After Homecoming, where he's basically Spider-Man at this point, right? Because the town knows him, New York knows him. Throughout Homecoming, he's actually there, going out helping people and all of that. And at the end of Homecoming, Tony Stark has actually a huge press conference ready for him, where he wants to introduce him as Spider-Man to the rest of the world, and that he wants to introduce him as an Avenger. He gives him the Iron Spider suit, which he politely declines and goes back. But regardless, people already know that there is a Spider-Man. But we didn't see the likes of J. Jonah Jameson in this. We didn't see the likes of what the effects of the press were on him, what his world actually looks like, because he's always in the shadows of the Avengers. He's always in the shadows of Tony Stark. And okay, that's fine. And whatever, you didn't have time to build his story because there was two Avengers films that's going to take place. Infinity War, huge, huge movie. My favorite Avenger movie, my favorite MCU movie. I don't think there's any other movie. Maybe The Winter Soldier, that was close. Captain America, The Winter Soldier was close. I think, yeah, maybe the first Iron Man. I think the first Iron Man is pretty good. Yeah, these are just a few, but as for the Avengers, Infinity War is definitely the best. But yeah, so Spider-Man, takes part throughout the Infinity War, like from the very beginning, where he's actually out there trying to save Doctor Strange, goes all the way to the end to Titan to fight the Mad Titan, and yeah, he gets dusted, like together with half of all the world, and very conveniently gets dusted together with his two best buddies, just so that when they all respawn, they all have the same age instead of having a 5-year gap, which, yeah, plot armor, convenience, and whatever, but I'm gonna let that slide because I think that that's not the most plot armor thing that the MCU has done. So I think that's arguably not so bad. Like the chances are 50-50, right? So whatever. Endgame. So in Endgame, he returns at the end of Endgame to join the battle right away against what do you call this, Thanos and his army. And yeah, I don't want to talk about the power creep that Thanos had in the end game because I don't know how he got all that strength without even a single Infinity Stone. But yeah, he defeats Thor, Cap, he defeats everyone, then it finally gets blown up back by Captain Marvel, who, no idea why she had to show up. They just had to throw some girl power in there, and that shit happened. And then Far From Home. So when we come back to Spider-Man Far From Home, we actually, revisit Peter Parker as, what do you call this? Um, he's back to high school. He's catching up with the, blip. They call it the blip, right? So yeah, it's after the blip. What happens after the blip? The transition that they take, and he proceeds to meet this Mysterio, Quentin Beck Mysterio. And once again, this is where the obscurity of how the Avengers are actually related to Spider-Man comes in. Because Tony Stark is no more in the picture, it seems like not one of the Avengers, besides Tony Stark, gives a shadow of a damn to Peter Parker. None of them. Not a single Avenger. I don't think they even know this guy exists because no one ever contacts, no one ever speaks to him, no one except for Happy Hogan, who is who used to work with Stark. But none of the other Avengers have ever spoken to him. Nick Fury has. That's for sure. So Nick Fury has. That's something that's for certain. But besides Nick Fury, not one of the other Avengers has actually ever helped him, spoken to him, like even considered him existing. Like if you watched the airport battle in Civil War, Captain America actually acknowledges, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and I thought that that's interesting because he might be a person that Peter may lean on or look up to, as he does in the comics. Actually, Peter Parker, Spider-Man does go to Captain America for advice, for help. He has even like attacked the Avengers mansion or whatever because. There's one comic I read where he attacks the entire Avengers headquarters because he needs help because Aunt May is kidnapped by, I believe, Norman Osborn Goblin, and he raids the Avengers mansion trying to look for some help. And Captain America actually comes out and tells that, "Hey, I can help you. What do you need?" And then Spider-Man actually refuses, like realizes at that point that if he were to ask for help, he would be giving away his identity just so that he can save Aunt May. And so he tells Cap, no, he has to do it on his own, and he just walks off, despite the damage he has caused, and despite the fact that Captain America was there for him. So, that's in the comics, but here it's really strange because the Avengers already know who he is. Like all of them know who he is because he took his mask off at the end of Endgame, right? And it's like, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker," to even Captain Marvel. And Tony Stark, I'm sure, has informed everyone that these are all everyone's identities and alter egos, and this is what everyone's here for, yada yada. So yeah, it's well established, but none of the Avengers ever went back to him, and I think this is a serious plot hole that I mean, even if you can't fully address it because you just want to give him more of his own story, the fact that you've made sure that he relied on Tony Stark for like three and a half films, I think you have to at least put some kind of effort to sort of just acknowledge the fact that he is still an Avenger as knighted by Tony Stark, be it in a ship that's going to crash on Titan. Doctor Strange knows who he is. Yeah, Cap knows who he is. Thor knows who he is. So even if Cap has gone back to another timeline and never to be seen again, I'm sure he would inform the Avengers that there's this kid I need you guys to keep an eye on. He's an Avenger. He's a good kid, and he's a superhero. Like that's what they're doing, recruiting superheroes, and they leave this guy by himself to suffer. So yeah, it's really, really just that plot hole that really screwed up the entire story for this Tom Holland Spider-Man. Everything beyond Endgame was a mess, and I'm not sure if it's because of the lack of involvement from the big guys, those main script writers that took it all the way to Endgame, but everything from there really went south. So Quentin Beck's story, first of all, Nick Fury not being the real Nick Fury and all that, whatever that is for, I'm sure it's gonna be worth it. At least I hope so, because if it's not, goddamn Nick Fury, you could have just waited until this entire Quentin Beck thing blew over. But yeah, anyway, Quentin Beck is bad guy, whatever. All that goes back to his own timeline. None of the other Avengers are ever involved in this, considering there's like a huge what they call an Avengers level threat with not a single Avenger involved. Unless you are saying that Spider-Man was the Avenger, which if he was and he did stop it, then the Avengers should at least come at the end to back him up, to say that yes, J. Jonah Jameson, he is Spider-Man, but he's actually a good kid. He actually stopped this, Quentin Beck from using Edith to kill everyone, and we actually can vouch for him and his friends to continue to college. And even if it's not normal college, I'm sure they have college for people who are privileged, especially children of superheroes, like maybe Hawkeye's kids. I'm sure he has a plan to send them to not an ordinary college, because I'm sure some people would know that this Clint Barton, right, is Hawkeye, and if he has children, they obviously know his children because everyone sees Hawkeye's face. He doesn't wear a mask, right? It's not like in the comics where he actually wears a mask. In this one, he doesn't wear a mask, so everyone knows who he is. So obviously, his kids have to go to some special school or something. And I'm sure that they already have this thing organized for people who are superheroes and children who are superheroes on what kind of schools they want to go to, to keep them safe and to protect them and whatever. So they could have at least come up with something intelligent, but none of them was introduced. And then there was this. Venom Let There Be Carnage nonsense which took place, which has absolutely nothing to do with No Way Home, or rather, someone thought it'd be a good idea to leave that in there just in case they wanted to have a story, but probably the scripts didn't work out, or the agreement didn't work out with Sony, or something happened between Sony. I'm sure Sony had a thing to say about it. But whatever that was, we get back to No Way Home. So now in No Way Home, without the Avengers, all of a sudden, who are actually there, I swear, if they bring the Avengers back in another movie, and they and if they don't have a shot of Spider-Man asking where were you for the past like freaking 4 or 5 years when I was resetting the entire world and destroying reality, I'm not sure what's going on in the MCU anymore ever again. So in No Way Home, Peter Parker actually does one intelligent thing in this film, which is he goes to Doctor Strange, the person who he fought with at the end of Endgame, the person who he has built a relationship, the other superhero, the other Avenger, the other person who he knows he can trust. Something he did not do in Far From Home, right? He has this incredible stock technology. He's fooling around with it. Despite all of the experience he has had in the previous films, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, Homecoming, all the experience he has about the responsibility he needs to have as a superhero, the responsibility he takes on himself in order to stop the vulture. Despite all of that, he screws it completely over in Far From Home by playing around with this technology, um, handing it over to Quentin Beck without checking with the Avengers, without discussing with important people like Strange or what do you call this, Clint, or I think Natasha's not around anymore. So who else is taking over? I'm sure there's Wakanda, who he can talk to because they are experts in technology and they have the most intelligent, second most intelligent, actually right now the most intelligent person in the world, who is what do you call this? Black Panther's younger sister. What's her name? Shuri, yeah, Shuri, right? So Shuri is like the most intelligent person now because Stark is no longer there, and I'm not sure whether what do you call this? Hulk is considered part of the picture. Like, is Bruce Banner still in the picture? Because Bruce Banner should still be around, and he was also not consulted regarding Edith. I think he would have actually been the right person to go to because he was the closest with Stark, who worked with Stark on a lot of technology, especially worked with Stark on Jarvis. So I think that he would have been the right person to go to, but he was not approached regarding Edith. And yes, this whole screw over happens. Um, and even after that, in No Way Home, he actually does one intelligent thing, which is he goes to Strange. He could have gone to Bruce Banner. He could have gone to the Avengers, who would have actually helped him in a simpler way. They could have said, "You know what? You're an Avenger. We can vouch for you. We can get this whole thing over with." But instead, he goes to the Wizard, hoping to do something with a spell. And that's also strange because Strange doesn't consult the Avengers either. He thinks he can do this by himself with Peter Parker, which is also okay. And they go for the worst spell. They don't go for the spell that tells the world is going to forget that Mysterio has revealed the identity of Peter Parker. They don't do that spell. They do the spell that says everyone's going to forget who Peter Parker really is. And there are consequences in the spell that the Sorcerer Supreme, oh sorry, not the Sorcerer Supreme anymore, doesn't really go through. Like Doctor Strange just fought people at world-ending levels like Thanos, and you're telling me he doesn't think about the fact that Spider-Man has a big mouth? Like he knows that from Endgame. He could have used the spell to just shut him up while he was doing the spell. I think that would have done the trick. Or he could have told him, "Hey, I'm going to do this spell. I need you to categorize what you need." And then get it over with. But no, none of the smart things happen. They do the stupidest thing, whatever plot convenience or whatever that's needed to be done is done in order to make sure that the world goes to shit. And when that happens, not everyone who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man shows up either. Because if you think about it, Aunt May from both the Spider-Man films also know that Peter Parker. Wait, do they know? Aunt May from the Toby film definitely knows that he's Spider-Man, so she should have shown up. I'm sure that all the people in the train that Toby saved in the second film know that he's Spider-Man, so they should have shown up. Like if the spell was if Doctor Strange really said that everyone who knows that Peter Parker Spider-Man shows up, everyone in the train from Toby's film would have definitely shown up in No Way Home, which would have been hilarious by the way. But that's what's supposed to happen. And if you tell me no, it's not everyone who knows that he's Spider-Man. It's only people who are dead who knows that he's Spider-Man. Well, if that's true, Gwen could have shown up. I mean, I see no reason why Lizard showed up, but Gwen doesn't. Gwen didn't, considering Lizard died before Gwen. Gwen Stacy should have shown up in Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that would have made total sense because she's a person who's dead, and she knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and probably both the Uncle Bens would have shown up. But hey, you know, anyway, so now you're telling me that no. It's not the people who know that he's Spider-Man. It's not the villains who know that he's Spider-Man. It's sorry, it's not the people who love him. It's only the villains who know him as Spider-Man. If it's true, it's only the villains. Then why come to the theory that all these villains have to be the ones who died fighting Spider-Man? I think it's because everyone did die fighting Spider-Man technically, but then the Goblin from Spider-Man 3 didn't show up. The Tobey Spider-Man 3 Goblin. He didn't show up, which was really strange. Um, and Sandman didn't die fighting Spider-Man. So not sure why he showed up, but you can have the plot, the sort of the gray area where you say that Sandman eventually dies fighting Spider-Man in the future, maybe because Toby is a little bit older, right? So they could have said that, which is still probable, but they didn't do that. They didn't explain why. So Sandman being there while everyone else has died fighting Spider-Man is just weird. And if Sandman was sent back, he wouldn't die anyway. So that wouldn't be on Tom Holland's conscious. Anyway, uh, you get what I meant, right? Okay, so you have all of these weird whatever thrown in plots going on. The fan service in this film was great, but the story was just dumpster level. Dumpster fire, dumpsters, like the dumpster fires like in a dumpster, all right? That's what it was. It was just so horrifyingly bad that I no way how they can ever undo this. And of course, they can undo this. They just gotta reset the entire thing, reset his character, reset the story, reset his friends. They have no reason for anyone to remember him. Why build all the relationship up over 6 films when you can delete it and do it all over again? And that's what they're gonna do. At the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, Tom Holland basically is not remembered by a single person. And I'm not sure how that affects his I don't know, identification card. Is he an American citizen still? Is he a person without like does he have a driving license? Does he have a passport? Does he have a school? Does anyone remember that he studied somewhere or he lived somewhere? Like is he like a beggar now because no one knows who he is, so he has no property to his name. Since Aunt May also would not know who he is, so there'll be nothing written to him. So does it mean at the end of No Way Home was the biggest screw up in the history of superhero films, where Tom Holland's Spider-Man is now just some guy on the street. He has to steal from a day-to-day basis to try to live, get food, find shelter, find water, because there's really no one that knows him right now. Peter, his identity as Spider-Man is secret once more, sought out MJ in the coffee shop and diner where she worked, only for her to stare right through him as another random customer and greet Ned with a smile. Despite his plans and promise to remind the two of who he was after seeing the happiness of planning to go to MIT without his problems in their lives, he decided against it and ordered a coffee instead, wishing them well and leaving. He visited May's grave and promised to carry on doing what she had taught him to do, and also held a brief conversation with Happy, who was also visiting the gravesite but oblivious to who Peter was. He began renting out a cramped, dingy studio apartment where he moved in with a fresh lease on life, planning to finish out his GED since his high school transcript had been erased, and readying himself to resume life as Spider-Man with an all-new red and blue suit. So, so yes, we can agree that literally no one knows him since his high school transcript had been erased. But what about his identification card being erased? His birth certificate, his birth records, like records of him ever existing in places that he should have existed because he was involved in Endgame, especially the events of Endgame. And now even Doctor Strange doesn't know who he is. How does that affect his multiverse? Like now the current Peter Parker's multiverse, Peter 1, right? So yeah, it has messed up things to a level beyond saving, and the MCU has taken this part. And well, first of all, I tell you that it's daring, honestly, like kudos for the fact that you want to take up this huge and insane concept and decision, but there's no way of telling the story. There's no way you can actually cover yourself and tell that I made this conscious decision to do this nonsense to Peter Parker. There's no way to save him from this point, and I find that you know just insanely weird and amazing at the same time. But why did it go from here, from an airport fight, to Homecoming, which was great, to Infinity War, which was great, to Endgame, which was great, to Far From Home, to this, right? Anyway, that's my rant as a Spider-Man fan because man, this character has brought me up through the years. Like I've seen superhero timelines being reset, right? I'm talking like things like Flashpoint, where they redid everything for the New 52, where they had the Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan facing Superman, and then everything reset. And then, of course, them resetting Superman's character through the years, them resetting Spider Man's characters through the years. But that reset is for a whole new character. But this Tom Holland, it's not over for him. They're resetting him to undo the character development that has taken him 5 films. You know, we had literally 5 films: one, two, three, skip Endgame, four, five, right? To develop his character and thrown away at the end of No Way Home because all the relationships he has built is reset. He's an identityless person right now, living in the world, which is super strange. I'm not sure whether he will ever be associated with the Avengers again. Uh, that's a whole other thing. Whether the Avengers are still there or not, that's of course in the question. But whether he'll ever be associated with the new Avengers or something like that is also in question because remember the end of Endgame, where they had like that walk of new Avengers or something like that with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Wanda and Vision and I don't know. I think I know Clint had left the place, but he has his own mini series. Natasha's sister is around. She showed up in Hawkeye. Who else do we have as the new Avengers? Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it. Falcon Winter Soldier is one. WandaVision is the other. Hawkeye and Natasha's sister is the other. Yelena, right? Yelena. Uh, yeah, of course, Captain Marvel is still around somewhere. Hulk is still there. Bruce Banner, who I think should be the leader. Like he's one of the founding fathers of the Avengers. I think he should clearly be the leader of the Avengers right now. So him missing is also really strange. And then Nick Fury being off-world, and then all of a sudden some alien taking over his place, and then us having to wait for a few films to find out why he's away. I better hope it's worth it, because Nick Fury, if you went out there for some stupid reason and left Peter Parker to deal with all this shit, man, it would just be such a turn off. So anyway, that's me expressing my idea and thought on how this plot had taken such a strange, obscure, and messy turn to a complete nothingness in No Way Home, which has basically redone Spider-Man of over the last 6 films he was in, the last 5 films of character development, back to zero, back to square one, and basically wasted time building him up over these films. Like if they wanted to do this from the start, they could have just done it. But they invested us through all these to nothing. And that's fine too if you really want to do that reset and tell us that we know we invested so much in the character, but we want to redo the character because we feel that we can do him better if we do it differently. Okay, if that is true and that is the case, why bring in that entire involvement of two other Spider-Man in No Way Home? You get what I mean? Like the reason they want to redo him is because they want him to be free from the Avengers, free from Tony Stark, free from the mentorship of all these other superheroes. But what happens in No Way Home? He's once again in the middle of a dynamic trio, two other Spider-Man, and he's once again being, like learning from them and sort of getting to know their knowledge and their secrets and how they dealt with problems in their lives. With great power also comes great responsibility, by the way, and all that stuff happens, right? All that happens in No Way Home, and the only thing he can teach the other Spider-Man is that he was an Avenger. He says it, and which is why he's better at working with people, working in groups. And he actually teaches the other two Spider-Man how to work in a team. So if he's so good at working in a team, why don't just call the actual Avengers? Huh? Is it so difficult, Peter Parker, for you to find what on earth to do, or rather the right thing to do? It's so strange. And yeah, and on top of the involvement of the other two Spider-Men, um, and him wanting to fix the villains to send them back to their own home worlds where they may or may not die, or maybe they'll die a good person, or maybe they won't die because now the other two Spider-Man, respectively, know that they're good people. And I'm not sure how that'll affect those Spider-Mans in their timeline. Like, for example, if Toby didn't end up killing um, what do you call this? Actually, that guy on the rooftop that Toby killed in the first film also knows he's Spider-Man, right? So he should also show up in. Okay, never mind. You know what? So anyway, the Spider-Man killing. If Spider-Man didn't kill the Goblin in the first film, right? His relationship between him and Harry and MJ and Aunt May would be totally different, right? He would not be affected by the weight of the death of Norman Osborn on top of his uncle's death. Like in the first film itself, Toby went through three very important deaths: the death of his uncle, the death of the murderer of his uncle, or supposed murderer, and the death of Norman Osborn, Goblin. So these three deaths really shaped Peter Parker. What do you call this? Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker in the first film. But if you remove Norman Osborn from that equation, things really change. Like his path down to the next film, in which Otto Octavius now is a good person, who dies a good person at the end of Spider-Man 2, actually. So now that he's been turned to a good person because they fixed the chip at the back of his neck, we're not sure which point he actually becomes a good person, and thus Peter Parker doesn't have to kill, doesn't end up, having to lose him. And that would mean that his identity to, because in Spider-Man 2, only because he was fighting with Doc Ock at the end did MJ find out his identity. So now that Doc Ock is a good person, maybe they don't end up in that final fight, and maybe Doc Ock decides it's a bad idea to rebuild that sun generation thing, and decides not to. And that would mean that MJ doesn't find out that Tobey Maguire is Spider-Man, and things may not go accordingly to his timeline. So by deciding to fix these villains and not listening to the actual Sorcerer Supreme, sorry Wong, I don't want to hear about Wong anymore as Sorcerer Supreme. I don't have no idea who wrote that. Like who got that idea to say that? Let's not say that he's Sorcerer Supreme now. Let's put it as Wong just to have another little laugh there or whatever nonsense. So now that you know, the real Sorcerer Supreme's advice, to send these people back, let them just die as they were intended to, is not followed by Tom Holland. He actually fixes all these villains, sends them back accordingly. The way that would affect the other two Spider-Man is a whole other story that will create a whole other either the branch timeline nonsense or affect the original timeline and thus making sure that Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland are totally different in their own Spider-Man universes as a result. And that will create a paradox where they would not have even appeared here. But hey, that's not how time travel works in the MCU, right? That's not how time travel works. That's what they say. That's what they say, but they have no idea what they're saying. And so we got No Way Home. So we got No Way Home. And honestly, for the script writers, there's no way out of this. It's no way home for you. If you ask me, that's what it is. And yeah, that's about it. So I just thought of getting this out of my head. It's a bunch of thoughts that I have. I thought I wanted to share with you guys because I haven't really ranted about a film in a while. And I know that some of you have actually come to this channel for the rants. And I know that some of you haven't got enough of it and have left. And I know some of you have actually been looking forward and hanging on and hoping that one day I might dump something like this and just like bring on the hate all the to all the blind fans out there who are just liking it because it's a Spider-Man film, because it's funny, because it is comedy, because they can laugh their hearts out and not care anything about the development of the characters, the story that is actually being played out, the importance that is Spider-Man, and the fact that with great power, comes great responsibility actually means something in the world. Like people who watch this who are just here for the gags obviously don't care for it. They really don't know what it even means, don't understand it. They just think, oh, it's a Spider Man quote. With great power comes great responsibility. Too bad I don't have great power. The point that Uncle Ben made in the two Spider Man films was not to a person who had powers, but to a person who had the ability to make change. And that's what Spider Man was about. And I think it's best said, in fact, in Civil War, where I think Peter Parker actually has a conversation with Tony Stark when he was first being recruited, where he says, knowing that you could have done something about it and then not doing anything about it to realize later that you should have, that's what will actually kill you from the inside. And more so, it's about the importance of understanding that because you have the ability to make a change, you should. And that's the right thing to do. And that's what heroes do. And so that importance is completely overshadowed by all of this, all the way to the weirdest, strangest, most awkward death in Far From Home for Aunt May. I'm sorry, Aunt May. I don't know why they made you die in such a strange fashion. But with that goblin bomb that blew concrete couldn't blow off her face was super strange. I swear I thought that goblin bomb would just blow off her face, but it didn't. Regardless, she got a really strange death where I think she was dying twice. Like she fell down once, I thought she already did, and then she had a long conversation with Peter, and then had to die a second time, something like that. I don't know. It's just so weird. I have to watch that again just to laugh at it. So yeah. Anyway, that's it for my rant for this one, guys. It's been a long one as always. It's been super enjoyable, and I love superheroes and the stories that are conjured around these people. Just a science fiction of a person, an individual having abilities to make a difference, be it supernatural or natural, be it like Hawkeye or Batman, or be it like Superman and Spider Man. There's so many ways a person can acquire the ability and knowledge and powers to make a difference. And I really like the way the stories are built up for them to show how they actually mean something in the world. Like, the feeling of watching Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, then walking out of the cinema feeling absolutely powerful, knowing that you have the ability to make a change, even though you don't have powers. Uncle Ben was telling it to a person who he knew had no powers. Uncle Ben didn't know about Peter Parker having the abilities of Spider-Man. And that's the important message behind all the Spider Man stories that people tend to miss. It's not about the powers that he has, which is why in this one it really falls short when Aunt May says it. Because Aunt May basically got not only herself killed, but probably the entire multiverse because Peter Parker just didn't listen to Doctor Strange, which is super weird. Yeah. Alright guys. Take care. Thanks so much for watching.